All right, here's the quick oil walkthrough. This is my train station over here, so you can see where I'm at. I'm on the far west side of the map down here. So a bunch of oil fields here. So that's where we're hanging out. I have a little control tower. These are all individual switches, so all of my little modular factories are wired separately here. And so all these little buildings down there that I'm going to tour can be individually turned on and off with those switches. So all of this is basically just making rubber and plastic from one oil node. So here's all my switches. There's a little quick exit door. I have the hover pack on. Here's my train station that goes that way and also that way off to the nuclear factory. So I'll jam over to the first section, taking the hypertube. So, all right, here's my first building. This is the oil extractor. It's only one node. It's a pure node. Autosave. It's pure node, but I'm not actually using all of it either. It's just a regular old oil extractor, and I'm only using it at 63%. So I'm taking out 150 cubic meters. It all feeds down below and up into this fluid buffer that's full, and then all of that is fed into these refineries, and every single one of these is the same recipe. It's taking crude and it's making heavy oil and polymer resin. I'm using the heavy oil residue alternate. So all of these are doing the same thing. They all feed around there. So there's my pipe. They all feed around to the front, so they're outputting heavy oil and plastic here on the conveyor belt. And the heavy oil I send across the way, you can see there. The plastic, or sorry, the polymer resin goes across to the next building on this conveyor belt here, where I'm taking a bunch of water. I'll show that over here. My thing might die. There's a way in. So I got all the water extractors over here. The one is underclocked, that's why it's red. So it feeds water up into this building and takes the polymer resin that it uses from the last one. So here's the water. I've just got 3 of these guys making some rubber. I'm not using any of this rubber in the factory. I don't think. Maybe I am. I don't remember. I'm basically just using the polymer resin to make some additional rubber. So I could make this into plastic if I want to. You can make either rubber or plastic. It's called residual plastic, so it takes polymer resin and water. I'm just making rubber, which is polymer resin and water, but I could do the plastic too. It's the same thing. I just chose plastic because I feed it back into the factory later on. So I got some walkways going here, which is cool. Got a little design in my building, which I really like. So yeah, that's making the first little sections of rubber, and then it just goes out. It goes back out on the belt here. So all of this is my little logistics floor, and so everything happens underneath. So all the water and output and inputs are kind of wrapped around under here, and the rubber gets outputted back into the factory we were just in, and then eventually up to the train here. So the rubber comes all the way around, back out this way, and eventually into the final assembly building, which is over there, which is just run up to the train. I'm not using it in the building. So that's the solid output, the polymer. So the heavy oil that these things are making goes over here to my fuel factory. This is my yellow, orange, whatever fuel factory. So I do output some water as well. Oh, I ran out of juice. There we go. I output some water from the pipe as well. Some of it's used in this building, and then the other bits are sent over here to my fuel factory. And so the water comes in, the heavy oil comes in from the first plant. You can see I've got a little backup storage container. It's at a higher elevation, so it'll fill last, so it's not even full at this point. Just if my math was a little bit off, it will not stop everything from running. So the heavy oil comes in right here. It gets split up into these 3 blenders. Every blender is using the same recipe. I'm taking water and heavy oil and I'm making fuel. It's called diluted fuel, which is a massively awesome recipe. So you can see I'm overclocking these blenders because they're not Mark IIs or anything. So I just overclock them. I'm making a whole bunch of fuel, 133 times 3. All right, so I'm making like 400 fuel here per minute. Some of the excess you see is in this pipe. So this is the outflow. It goes into this big storage container, and then eventually it follows this pipe out and goes over into the final production facility. But I don't need that much for what I'm making. So I divert the excess over here, and I have 3 power plants, fuel generators, burning up the excess. I got it figured out where they burn up only the excess fuel here, and so I had to mess around with the clock speed quite a bit to get the math to work out. And so they just produce energy with my extra fuel that I couldn't use in the final assembly building. So I take oil out of this building here. I like the roofs too. So I take oil out of this building. I send the plasticky stuff, whatever they call it, the little bits, over there. I mix it with water, make some rubber, which goes back to the train. I send the heavy oil over here to make fuel. Some of the fuel goes to the power plants. The other fuel goes over into my final assembly building, which is over here. It's a couple layers. I have rubber on the bottom and plastic on the top, so I color coded it green and blue. So I remember this is just a little landing zone. So this is the section. So you can see here's my logistics floor. So the fuel comes in, gets wrapped around a little bit. This is the rubber from the other plant. It just goes up to the splitter up there. So the fuel comes in, it gets pumped all the way up to partially here. So half of the fuel feeds all of these machines, and half of the fuel feeds the machines on the floor above. So you can see all the plastic is here. So basically fuel comes in, it runs through all of these refineries, but they have the recycled rubber thing. So you can see they take 45 and some fuel, and they make 90. So you're really, if you're using some fuel, you only need a little bit of plastic to make a lot more rubber. And so this disparity, this 45 rubber, is actually my production. So this whole building is a loop. I send the rubber up to the plastic, and I send the plastic down to the rubber, and they loop around each other. But since you're making more than you're putting in, the excess is what I send to the train. And so they're overclocked to handle all of that. I don't think all of them are. Maybe they are. I don't remember. Yeah, they're not all overclocked. It's just a little bit of a mess. So I send a little bit of fuel here. This plastic is coming from upstairs. So I got a little logistic line over here. So this plastic comes down, as you can see, gets wrapped around into these machines. And all of the rubber that I make out of these machines gets fed upstairs. This belt goes all the way over here, and it moves the rubber upstairs to the plastic machines. And so any overflow from this rubber down here goes into this super fancy programmable splitter, right? So the center goes up, the overflow goes to the sink, and the rubber goes out to the train. So both of these are going to my train station out here. So both of these lines are sent over to the train station, which get loaded up onto different freight cars and go over to my Dune Desert for my assembly director systems this way. So they're all made in there. So yeah, these are the rubber. It goes upstairs to the plastic. I think I can fly up over here. Yeah, perfect. And so it's almost an identical copy. This is just the rubber section, and so this is the rubber coming up, which feeds the plastic machines. So inputs are rubber at 30, outputs are plastic at 60. So I'm getting 30 extra plastic every time this runs because I'm using fuel to take that out. So inputs are rubber and fuel from downstairs. All of these machines are making plastic. The output plastic gets sent all the way over here, and it goes downstairs, which we just saw, to the rubber section. And so here's where it gets split, right? Any plastic that these machines don't need to make rubber gets sent over here to the train, right there. And then once this gets full and the train cargo area is full of plastic, and so nothing else can move, then it overflows to my sink, and I just sink any extra plastic or rubber that happens to not be used. So obviously I don't need as much plastic in my world right now, but I do need some rubber because it hasn't backed up yet. But this has, and so it goes over to the sink. So there you go, that's my fancy rubber setup, and so I got my train over here, I got my control tower with super fancy hyper tubes. I made a cool little star-shaped design thing with a ladder, and then I can, like I said, turn everything on and off as well. There you go.